It is a Sunday night in August. The year is 1971. Most of America is watching a rerun of Bonanza on a wooden television set with the volume turned up so the kids in the kitchen can hear it. At 9 p.m. Eastern Time, the Western cuts off. A man in a dark suit appears on the screen. He is sweating slightly under the studio lights. Behind him, an American flag. In front of him, a stack of paper he barely looks at. His name is Richard Nixon. And in the next 18 minutes, without using the word once, he is going to end the system that has decided what every dollar in your wallet is worth for the previous 27 years. He is going to do it on a Sunday night because the markets in Tokyo open in 9 hours. He is going to do it without asking Congress, without asking the public, without asking the rest of the world, which holds billions of his country's dollars and assumes those dollars can still be exchanged on demand for gold. By Monday morning, that promise will no longer exist. You have lived your entire life inside the world that followed. Every price you have ever paid, every wage you have ever earned, every mortgage, every loan, every grocery bill has been calculated in a currency that nobody can take to a window and trade for anything real. So what actually happened that night? And what did it do to you? Let's go back to the beginning. In 1944, while the Second World War was still being fought, delegates from 44 countries gathered at a hotel called the Mount Washington in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The hotel sat in a cold valley with the mountains all around it and the paint peeling off the white clapboard walls. The delegates met in the dining room. They were trying to design a money system that would not collapse the world a second time. What they agreed on was simple. Every major currency on Earth would be pegged to the US dollar, and the US dollar would be pegged to gold. Specifically, $35 would buy 1 ounce of gold from the United States Treasury on demand, no questions asked. This meant the dollar was not really a piece of paper. It was a claim ticket. It was a coupon for a small, specific weight of yellow metal sitting in vaults under Manhattan and inside a base in Kentucky called Fort Knox. If you were a foreign government, you could take your dollars to a window in New York and walk out with gold bars in a wooden crate. For about 20 years, the system worked. Then the United States started printing. It printed to pay for the war in Vietnam. It printed to pay for the Great Society. It printed to pay for the moon landing. It printed for every promise a country makes when it does not want to choose between two things it wants. By 1971, the United States had issued far more dollars than it had gold to back them. The rest of the world noticed. The first to act was France. Charles de Gaulle, the French president, did not trust the American promise. In 1965, he started sending dollars back. Quietly at first, then with a flourish. By the late 1960s, he was sending French naval ships across the Atlantic to physically collect American gold and sail it back to Paris. The bars went from one vault to another vault across an ocean. The dollars stayed behind. Britain followed. Switzerland followed. By the summer of 1971, foreign governments were redeeming dollars for gold faster than the United States could replace them. American gold reserves had fallen from over 20,000 metric tons after the war to less than 9,000. If the run continued, the vaults would be empty inside a year. That is the moment Nixon called 15 men to Camp David. It was the second weekend in August. The mountain air was cool. The cabin still smelled of pine and old wood smoke from the spring. The men included the Treasury Secretary, a Texan named John Connally, who had taken a bullet through the chest in the same car as John F. Kennedy 8 years earlier. They included the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Arthur Burns, who argued against what was about to happen until he was outvoted. They included a young undersecretary named Paul Volcker, who would later run the Federal Reserve himself, and who would spend the rest of his life trying to clean up the consequences of the decision he watched made in that room. They argued for 3 days. Then they made the call. On Sunday night, the speech went out. Nixon told America he was protecting the dollar against speculators. He used the phrase temporary suspension. The convertibility of dollars into gold, he said, was being paused. Temporarily. It has now been temporary for over 50 years. But here's where it gets stranger. Because the public, watching at home, did not understand what they had just been told. The next day's newspapers led with a wage and price freeze Nixon had announced in the same speech. That was the story everybody talked about. The gold window closing was buried in paragraph 6. The Dow Jones rose 33 points that Monday. Oh, the largest single-day gain in its history at the time. People thought they had been saved from inflation. They had been signed up for 50 years of it. The phrase economists later used for August 15, 1971 was the Nixon shock. The historian Louis Lehrman, who lived through it as a young man on Wall Street, would write decades later that nobody in America understood that night what their grandchildren would be paying for. They thought it was a policy announcement. It was a regime change. And it gets worse. Because once a currency is no longer backed by anything, the amount of it that can exist becomes a political decision, not a physical one. Before 1971, the United States could only create as many dollars as it had gold to back. After 1971, it could create as many dollars as the people in charge thought it needed to. In 1971, the total amount of money in the U.S. system, by the measure economists call M2, was about $680 billion. By 2024, it was over 21 trillion. The amount of dollars in existence multiplied by roughly 30 times in a single human lifetime. The amount of work, land, food, and people in the country did not. The dollars chasing them did. This is why a house your grandfather bought for $20,000 in 1971 now costs $400,000. The house did not change. The dollar did. The dollar got smaller. It kept getting smaller every single year of your life, quietly, in the background, while the number on your paycheck stayed roughly the same in name and lost about 85% of its purchasing power. In fact, a federal minimum wage worker in 1971 made $1.60 an hour and could rent an apartment, own a car, support a family, and put aside savings. Adjusted for the way the dollar has been printed since, the same worker today would need to make about $25 an hour to live the same life. They make $7.25. Nobody changed the worker. Nobody changed the apartment. Somebody changed the dollar. And here is the part nobody talks about. Every chart of inequality in America, every graph of housing prices, college tuition, healthcare costs, every line that economists shake their heads at and call the Great Divergence, every single one of them bends sharply upward in the same year. 1971. There is a website called WTF, happened in 1971, that does nothing but show these graphs in a row. Wages and productivity, parallel for decades, split in 1971. Median home price as a multiple of income, flat for decades, climbing since 1971. Top 1% share of wealth, falling for decades, reversing in 1971. None of the people who wrote those charts knew each other. They were measuring different things in different fields with different methods. They all hit the same wall in the same year, because that was the year the cost of every promise the government wanted to make stopped being paid in gold and started being paid in your savings. Inflation is not a tax you can see. It does not arrive in the mail. It is taken from you in the time between when you earned a dollar and when you spent it. Every year that dollar sits, somebody, somewhere, is printing more of them. And the dollar in your hand becomes a smaller and smaller slice of a bigger and bigger pie. You did not consent to this. You were not asked. The conversation happened in a cabin in the woods on a weekend in August in 1971, and you have been paying for it ever since. So here is the reframe. You did not fail to get ahead. You did not pick the wrong career. You did not buy the wrong house at the wrong time. You did not make the mistakes your parents warned you against. You're running in a race where the finish line moves backward by about 3% every year of your adult life, and nobody bothered to tell you that the rules changed before you were born. And here's what's worse. The system is not going to be put back. The gold window will not be reopened. There is not enough gold left in any country's reserves to back the amount of money now in circulation. The Bretton Woods Agreement is dead, and it is not coming back. The currency you hold is, and will remain, a piece of paper whose value depends entirely on the trust the rest of the world places in the people who print it. But here's the mercy. You know this now. Most people do not. Most people still believe that if they work harder, save more, and wait longer, the system that produced their grandparents' prosperity will eventually produce theirs. They are running into a wall they cannot see. You can see it. And once you can see it, you can stop measuring your life in the unit that is shrinking. You can measure it in things that do not get printed. Time with people who love you. Skills that grow inside you. Land that stays where it is. Friendships that compound the same way the dollar used to. A body that you keep moving. A mind that you keep curious. None of that needs a gold window to be worth something. A man in a dark suit interrupted Bonanza and changed every price tag in your life, but he never figured out how to print what actually matters. If this kept you thinking longer than you expected, that's the channel working. Subscribe. The next one's already coming.